Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the censorship series. My name is Mandy Sally. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Woodhull Freedom Foundation and the host of our Censorship of Sexual Freedom series. So, this program is pretty exciting because it's part two of three programs that we're showing this summer called Defying the Censors. So, we interviewed 10 folks who are out there using their creativity to define the censors in their own unique way. We met several folks last month in June. Don't worry if you missed that conversation. It is posted to our YouTube page. I will post the link in the chat so you can check that out. Or, you can always subscribe to our YouTube page. We are at Woodhull Freedom Foundation on YouTube. And if you like and subscribe, you'll be notified every time we post a new recording. So that is available to everyone. I also want to invite all of you to join the Vanguard Society. The Vanguard Society is our newly launched program for regular monthly donors here at the Woodhull Freedom Foundation. By joining the Vanguard Society as a monthly donor, you're telling us that you believe in our work and that you want to support the work we're doing to fight for sexual freedom here in the United States. And boy, is there a lot of work to be done. Right? So regular monthly support allows us to focus on the work. It allows us to know that we have regular, stable income and we can continue fighting for sexual freedom without having to worry so much about fundraising. And we would really appreciate your support. So you can head on over to woodhullfoundation.org/donate to join the Vanguard Society. I will also drop the link in the chat to make it easy for folks. We would love to have you there. And I hope to see some of you join the Vanguard Society after today's program. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our first guest this month, and that is Jiz Lee. Jiz Lee is an adult film actor, author, and industry advocate. They've performed in porn for 2 decades and in 6 countries, and in projects spanning independent, queer, and hardcore gonzo adult films. Jiz works behind the scenes as marketing director at Pink and White Productions. They run an erotic philanthropic art project to fundraise for organizations that push towards progress in sexual rights and labor. And they're the creator and editor of Coming Out Like a Porn Star, an anthology of essays by adult film industry workers on the social stigma of sex work. They're co-editor of the Porn Studies Journal Special Issues Porn and Labor, and are a member of the Porn Studies Journal editorial board, and a contributing author and editor of the sexuality chapter in the 2nd edition of Trans Bodies, Trans Selves. Let's go chat with Jiz. Could you tell us a little bit about your work and how you use your chosen medium to advocate for human rights, sexual freedom, and visibility?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Jiz Lee, and I do performance, and that has opened the doors to a lot of things, from blogging and writing and being published to public speaking, which I'm still working on, and working behind the scenes in adult media. So right now I am a content licensor for pinklabel.tv, and I also am a production manager for crashpadseries.com. Crashpad is a queer porn website that is sort of known for its reflection of the queer and trans community. And pinklabel.tv is a platform for independent erotic and adult films from all over the world and from all eras and all different types of genre, which is super exciting. So it's hard to talk about yourself and like, this is what I do for sexual freedom, but I guess it is woven into my interest in sexuality and therefore my interest in like what I'm involved with in my work in the fields of sex. And so like through, my day job, which is like the official title is marketing director, but we're a small company, so we're wearing a lot of hats, right? Mm-hmm. To be very resourceful in all of this. Sex sells, but it's not well funded, oddly.
Isn't it funny how that works?
Yeah. So I think that I use my interest in sexual diversity and my attraction to honest conversations about sex and candidness about sex and joy and pleasure in sex to curate, whether it's performance or film archives, to put that online to share, hopefully with people who are appreciating audiences who are craving this kind of representation or curiosity around what sex might look like on camera. And then through my performance, I think that I try to embody that. And I do like to say that I hold a very privileged position as a performer because I have a day job that is not on camera, which allows me to be really picky about the films that I do. And I don't think I would have made it so far in my career had I not had, well, I don't think I would have been, back when studios are like the gatekeepers of who gets cast, right? Before, everyone before performers had the power to be their own producers and were reliant on an agent or just knowing the right person to be cast in a film, I wouldn't have had enough films to even pay rent, So there just wasn't a lot of opportunity, particularly back then. When I say back then, for people who don't know, I've been doing this since 2005. So up until recently, now that, performers can be producers and there's a lot more power in that, that's not so longer the case where performers can be a full-time, have a little bit more say in what they want to do. And that's been great. But because I have a day job, the projects I choose can be ones that I feel are more reflective of myself and my values. And so I think that therefore I feel that freedom to give myself more honestly in how I'm represented, have a little bit more power in how I'm represented. And I hope that through either through the expression or creativity in my work, that resonates with other queer people, other people like me. And also I have these auxiliary projects that I do, like I blog about my work, or I edited a book coming out like a porn star, in which I invited other voices to share trials and tribulations and strategies and stigmas and everything around being out or not about working in porn. And so I hope that by having the platform of having been published before and then having access to a publisher and then inviting other voices to join me, that I've been able to further those conversations around sex, because there's a lot of stigma that, wrap all that into sexual freedoms and the autonomy that we have as sex workers to be public and visible about this.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of attending a panel discussion that featured many of the folks who wrote for Coming Out Like a Porn Star here in New York a couple months ago. And I was, as somebody who's pretty well aware of what's happening in this world of sexual freedom and sexuality, I was still really blown away by the diversity of experiences in the book. And it was so wonderful to be in this space and be having this conversation. And I'm so glad that you put together this book, and the panel was in honor of the 10th anniversary of the book. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that it's in the world, and then you reissued it again 10 years later, and it's still incredibly relevant to a lot of the conversations we're having.
And I'm so grateful to Feminist Press for taking on, not only to take on the publishing, because my original publisher shut down during COVID, but they took on the book, and they also were able to help me expand it into a second edition. So, and catch up to speed, when it first released, OnlyFans wasn't around. The environment's a bit different, same in a lot of ways, unfortunately, but also a bit different. So yeah.
For sure. And I wonder if you could share with us, do you remember, or is there a particular moment when you feel like your work in free expression, whether it be on film or blogs, writing, any medium, sparked conversation or change within the community?
I think, well, off the top of my head, and what this speaks to me is when something takes a life of its own, like when you do this project and then it either gets replicated or, adapted by somebody else. And like one example is Fisting Day. So I co-founded Fisting Day because I was frustrated at the censorship that I've experienced about not being able to fist on camera, which within my experience of sexuality, fisting is not this like big scary thing or something that's dangerous or anything that should be censored or restricted from sex. So it was frustrating, confusing, and it felt like it felt bigoted, and the people making this decision didn't know anything about sex. Clearly, if they are so scared of fisting, like, and very, like heteronormative, right? I say this in air quotes because hetero people can fist as well. But yeah, so like my first scene, I remember being aware that we had to, like, we were going to fist and we were okay. We were allowed to do it, but because it was released on DVD, which apparently the distributor would not allow fisting in the DVD. That they were still going to film it, but they just had to have the camera angle up, so they couldn't show it. So they had to like edit around and shoot, have the camera angle not show fisting, and that just felt so silly. Like, what dude is releasing this DVD that doesn't understand queer sex? And later on, I was in a film that had a video recording of live, like, state audience. There's an audience there watching fisting happen, and that was, I was told, had to be cut because of the fisting. And this was for an online release, and it made me so upset that, like, it used to be that online fisting was okay, right? And I was like, how is this feeding over into online release? And so anyway, we decided, like, make this Fisting Day occurrence so that we could use, like, the opportunity to educate about fisting, to normalize it, and celebrate it, and have people who like fisting talk about it. Any sex educator who wanted to use the opportunity to talk about fisting, to do so. Sex workers who enjoy fisting in their work, to do so. So it wasn't like specifically commercial. It was like the prime goal, I guess, was to educate, which would then hopefully further this releasing of the restriction of this really silly rule. And so Fisting Day took off, and like it's been 11 or 12 years, and maybe more. And 2011. And that's taken a life of its own.
Yeah.
And which is great. Unfortunately, fisting is still censored. So despite that, that effort, you can't fist on OnlyFans, for example. Other websites won't allow it, but we persevere.
Yeah, well, I don't know if folks know this, that there are, and we're not going to go too deep into this rabbit hole because we could probably do an entire 60-minute panel about all of the things that are, censored and not allowed in porn on various platforms. But there are certain activities and things that are not allowed. And so censorship is rampant and everywhere. And you spoke to this a little bit, but I wonder if there are other challenges that you've faced in being able to express yourself freely, and how you've overcome them. Fisting Day is like a great example, but would love to hear other thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. In just being who I am, I think I have a lot of privileges in many ways, and I have a lot of doors open to me that might not be open to a lot of my peers. But in other cases, I am not invited to the table in some spaces. And how I overcome them is, I guess, I'm persistent, and I think I try not to take too personally when I'm excluded. And I think that's just because I've seen these spaces open up over time. In some ways, I've felt of myself as sort of being like a gateway queer, if I can get my toe in the door, then maybe that'll leave opportunities for other people after me. And sometimes it just takes time for, I think, companies to evolve, for people to evolve. When I've come up against these obstacles, I'm and oftentimes it's like usually it's around gender. That I remember when it comes to like gender and sexuality, not everyone's on the same page about sex, and I don't think it's their fault, right? Like I think that in our society we do like a grave disservice because we don't educate people about sex, and if we're not teaching like this comprehensive age appropriate sex education in schools, right, how are we supposed to all be on the same page when it comes to gender and sexuality? And so I try to give people who might have bigoted opinions or uninformed opinions or hold certain untruths about gender or about sex, I try to give them some forgiveness and understand it's because they either it was how they grew up. They weren't surrounded by other people who have different experiences. I don't think that often it's intentional. I don't think people are intentionally bigoted, if that makes sense. Yeah. So knowing that, and then knowing that might be an opportunity for growth and education. And so I try not to meet those challenges with like a high defense, I guess. Like I don't call out usually.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah,
right?
there's a time and a place, but I think I try to use a softer approach and a more like educator and seeing those as opportunities, as future opportunities.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And, I wonder, you spoke a little bit about this, but is there an element of personal storytelling that you balance with sort of a broader call for like social change and activism in your work?
Like I mentioned before that that I'm very lucky to be able to pick and choose projects. And so I try to select projects or collaborate on projects that align with my values. And then also whenever I can, I try to bring in others and use any kind of opportunity I have to include additional voices, whether it's a panel, whether it's a book, whether it's a performance, whether it's licensing content or working with casting and hiring performers, because I think that at least in terms of like the queer community, our experiences are really broad, and the people that are queer are so expansive. No one person is going to be able to represent like everybody, and so we just keep on opening that circle wider and wider, and trying to create a space where people feel comfortable and are able to express themselves as freely as possible, given various restrictions, whether it's bill or restrictions on what you can do sexually or just limitations in terms of budget.
The ultimate limitation.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that comes across, and it clearly resonates with the folks watching Crashpad and the other series that Pink and White has produced, right? Because you're still around, folks are still tuning in, and that's wonderful. And I guess my last question, I hope you'll maybe dream with me a little bit on this one, because times are tough out there, right? There's a lot of censorship happening, particularly of the queer community, even more so of folks who are trans or gender nonconforming. And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what you might hope to change about the world with your work. And that can be as broad or as limited. This is sort of the like magic wand question.
So many things. So many things. I mean, in what I'm doing, I hope I bring more pleasure to people. I hope I give them a possibility model, as Laverne Cox calls it, not a role model, but a possibility model of ways that can exist that might be outside of their current comfort zone or what they're able to, how out they're able to be, or how freely they're able to move in the world, or possibilities of how they might get involved in the industry. I love when folks have told me that like my writing has encouraged them to write and share their experiences. So that feels really I think that all of these outlets that we have, as speaking as like porn performers, all these outlets that we have is incredible. I would have never seen myself as a writer. I would never see myself as a public speaker. I was speaking at campuses that I would have never been able to get into or afford to go to. I think that sharing our experiences is really important as sex workers. In an ideal world, sex work would be decriminalized, and that would solve a lot of other problems.
I appreciate that answer. And of course, listen, I'm all about decrim. Woodhull's been working on that for a long time. And so any opportunity to inject that into conversation, I think is a good one.
100%.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jiz. Jiz and Pink and White Productions have been wonderful supporters of the Woodhull Freedom Foundation. They often donated really wonderful prizes for our Sexual Freedom Summit, and I'm really glad that we could have Jiz as a part of this conversation today, and Shine Louise Houston, who you're going to meet a little later on in the conversation. I am overwhelmed in the best way by the insights and creativity of the folks who are a part of this program. I'm so glad that I got the chance to highlight them this month for all of you. The public education work we do at Woodhull Freedom Foundation is always free. It's always going to be as accessible as we can make it. And that's a part of our mission. It's really important to us that we are out there defying the censors, educating folks, advocating for sexual freedom and human rights, and creating materials that you all can use to advocate in your own communities. We want you all to use this information. We want it to be widely available. It is always going to be free to consume or download, but it's not free to produce. And so if you appreciate this, if you've used our tools or our resources in your own advocacy, or you've just learned something or been inspired, please consider joining us as a monthly donor. We launched a new monthly giving program a couple months ago called the Vanguard Society, and we would really appreciate your support. Donating monthly, just like you pay monthly for Netflix or Spotify, whatever subscription services you use, helps us because it's reliable income. It tells us that we have the financial support to keep doing the work and focus on doing the work. There's a lot of work to be done right now. And so we would really appreciate your support. If you can donate monthly, it means a great deal to us. You can join the Vanguard Society by heading to the link I'm going to drop in the chat, or just typing woodhullfoundation.org/donate into your browser. So thank you so much for your ongoing support of this series, of our programming, and any and all financial support you can provide. So thanks again. Let's get back into it. Next up, we're going to meet Ashley Wang. Ashley Wang is a queer, polyamorous, first-generation Chinese-American eldest child of immigrants. They were born and raised in Queens, New York, and graduated from Wellesley College with a BA in Women's and Gender Studies and Public Health. She's a sexual health educator, healing facilitator, dancer, and multi-hyphenate creative. Ashley has been in community-facing work for the majority of their life, serving in environments ranging from a homeless youth shelter to sexual reproductive health care clinics as an abortion doula. They lead their life journey through the lens of Yanfen, a concept of fatal coincidences and destiny in Chinese society. She believes in bringing the traditionally taboo and stigmatized realms of sexuality, pleasure, and shadow work into light for the benefit of all. Ashley is honored and grateful to have a role in creating safer, brave, and intimate spaces. How wonderful. Let's go chat with Ashley. Ashley, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited to hear more about you and your work. And just to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about your work and how you use your chosen mediums, because you're working in multiple mediums, to advocate for human rights, sexual freedom, and visibility?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I live in this like multi-hyphenate messiness of the human experience like realm, so I do have my toes just dipped in a lot of different places. I think the three primary ones is I am a sexual health educator. I was during my 9 to 5, so for 3 years. Actually, I think it even goes even further than that. When I was in high school, I started the my high school's first like gender gay straight alliance. Very stereotypical, I think, for people in the queer community and like in this field of work in general. And then started dabbling a little bit with sex ed. Then I did pure sexual health education when I was in college. I graduated from Wellesley College, class of 2020, and then after that, in post grad, I was a sexuality educator for New York City public schools through Planned Parenthood. So have been in the like teaching on a peer, talking about sexual health education on a peer level with like young people in classrooms, outside of classrooms. I also work as like my own sexual health educator, like privately. So I've done like events and also identify as a pleasure activist. So a lot of my work in this realm is inherently radical and like advocates for freedom of expression, human rights, and like visibility in all the ways. And obviously, I'm in it for as long as I have been because I absolutely love it. I think these topics that we touch upon specifically within the realm of sexual reproductive health and sexuality and pleasure are, like I always say, like sexuality is one of those things where everyone knows about it and everyone talks about it, but also no one talks about it. And having conversations like these is so, in my mind, I'm like, for no reason, like so stigmatized and taboo. But obviously, right, like everyone's coming from all these intersections of culture, religion, different backgrounds. So I think like one of my biggest, at least in terms of the educator role, is like just to spread as much like medically accurate, empowering, accessible information as possible, especially under this current administration where censorship and misinformation is so abundant, unfortunately. I also identify as a content creator. This is something like fairly new, and I'm kind of like, I don't know if like I have my official label but yet, but I definitely am a content creator. I've been trying to like combine all of again these multi-hyphenate aspects of me into it. So I'm uploading like sex ed content. I started a new series called like Sex Ed on the Go. So like I'll have my little mic and like just talk about different sex ed topics that honestly my friends and community members have been asking about, and it's gotten like such wonderful reception, and I'm so grateful for community for that. And I know we'll talk more about that later. But again, like with censorship and like algorithms and social media, it makes it increasingly difficult to like grow and just do that. But yes, I use that as a platform in some way to also like share my work. Also just in terms of like lifestyle, being I'm queer, I'm a first generation Chinese American queer and poly sexual health educator. So again, lots of commas, lots of multi hyphenates, and I hope that like in anything I share, regardless of the topic, like it will resonate and make people feel seen and that they're not alone in their experiences, even if it may be as niche or like not within the norm as my experience is. And then I also am a dancer. I've been dancing for almost a year and a half now, and it's been such like a beautiful healing way for me to just like express myself. And also like I see it intertwined with a lot of my work as well in terms of like sensuality and sexual energy, because I particularly dance in like more sensual, like I feel more I try to train or dance in all different types of styles because I love to be a jack of all trades. But yeah, with dance I really just I try all different types. I'm mostly like am called towards like more sensual forms of dance, so like heels in particular and like floor work, a little bit of pole. I'm trying to get back into that. And I think it's also just like such a beautiful way of like, because the core of sexuality and like dance is like feeling safe and secure in your body and being able to express that, and not for anyone else's sake, like for yourself.
Was there a time, or could you share a specific example when something you were doing sparked conversation or created maybe a little bit of change in your community?
One example is I will teach young people, like instead of STDs, say STIs, right? You drop one letter, it makes all the difference in terms of stigma and taboo. Same thing with when talking about negative STI status. Instead of saying someone's clean, saying they're clear. One letter literally makes all the difference. And it's just like seeing those gears turning in young people is just so beautiful to witness. My goal is like to inspire people to live in the realm of impossibility and really be expansive in terms of like how they define pleasure, how they define sexuality, how they define their dreams, their goals, like what their reality could look like. Because everything that we're living in now was once impossible to like former versions of ourselves. And then the one last thing was like I've had multiple, like, you know, I'm on the curvier side, like I really love to advocate for like body positivity, and in the dance community it's definitely more, from what I've heard, like way more empowering and like open, I think, than it was in the past. And in terms of like body size and like inclusivity and stuff like that. And I've had friends who like message me, and they're like, every time I see you dance, like it inspires me to like feel more confident in my body and like expressing myself and my sexuality. Because like you said, like I really, everything is intersecting for me. Like I don't like to live in compartments, you know, like being human means like having all of these things tied together. So I just see dance as, at least for me, like a beautiful outlet to just continue freely expressing myself and my sexuality.
Yeah, what's really striking me as I'm listening to you describe your work, and not just your work, but sort of how you approach life, is you're just you're so authentically showing up as yourself. What are some of the challenges you faced in showing up so authentically and expressing yourself so freely? And how have you sort of dealt with those?
Of course, in this work, obviously I'm sure multiple people have talked about in these conversations about like shadow banning and just like
Mhm.
the cost essentially that has been induced by FOSTA SESTA of like showing up as yourself, especially in the sexuality realm. And it's like you can't spread your message, you can't fully grow. Like Instagram literally says they hide my stuff from like discover pages because like I openly talk about sex, which is against guidelines. But um, and one thing I personally feel conflicted about, and it's interesting because I'm doing a presentation for my like 9 to 5 about this actually next week, is like I know there's a conversation amongst a lot of educators about like using algo speak and like
Mhm.
self-censoring in order to like surpass these algorithms and these like AI generated things in order to get your content viewed.
Yeah.
And I think there was the conversation actually hosted by you guys, right? Where people
Mhm.
are like, some people are like, we got to do what we got to do in order to get our content out there, right? It's about adaptability and survival, versus like others who are like, I refuse to like censor myself, and like it almost like reduces the medical accuracy, right?
Mhm.
Like not being able to just say the word sex when we're talking about like anatomy and human bodies and all these very natural and like normal things. Um, and I think that's one of those things like where I find myself conflicted often, and I'm still like playing around with it because I'm kind of new to content creation. Um, because yeah, I don't ever want to censor myself, and I don't want to like put an example out, especially for young people, to be like, oh, I can't say these words, or it's bad for me to say these words, when they're a necessary part of these conversations to have when like, you know, discovering parts of your sexuality. On the other hand, I do like on the almost like logical number sides, like back end, I see how like content that is in algo speak completely does differently, like numbers wise, than others. And so like it's that constant balance that I don't think I necessarily have like a concrete way of approaching it, other than like seeing kind of like what lands and what doesn't, and trying my best while trying to give as much like accurate, medically accurate, and like, you know, information as possible. Some challenges are definitely like hypersexualization, feeling boxed in, and like actively being like having to fight against like platforms that are actively suppressing and trying to censor.
So we talked about how you show up as yourself everywhere. And I wonder how you balance that, being yourself, being authentic, with um, the broader sort of call for social change that being a sex educator um, brings. How do you sort of walk that line?
Thank you. Yeah, I think inherently I live by like the personal is political, and something I was really excited to answer this question about is something that I always refer to is I don't know if you've heard of like Deepa Iyer's like ecosystem of social change.
I haven't.
So it came about in 2019 through the Black Lives Matter movement. She was just reflecting on like how essentially whenever as a society we go through this like mass wave of like social change and like political like uprisings and protests and stuff like that, there's this like pressure. It's like, oh my god, I have to do like everything in order to like, you can see it right now with like Palestine as well, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a big like energetic spike in the beginning, and then essentially because humans, we are human, it slowly fizzles down and people start burning out, when it's like the point of social changes we need to have this consistent like level of like activism, also like taking time for self-care in order to go back into the work. And so this like really struck me when I first saw it, where she essentially has this like web of like different roles that people can take on in social change movements. So there's like frontline responders, there's artists, there's storytellers, there's weavers, there's healers. Um, there's like a ton, I forget how many there are. And essentially it encourages you like take time to reflect. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you contribute to a social movement? And what are ways that we don't need to force ourselves to be, right? Like, I know that I'm a healer. I know that I'm a caregiver. I know that I'm a visionary, and I know I'm an artist. Those are my roles, and those are the ones I'm going to pour my energy into for both my own personal storytelling and like, showing up authentically as myself and contributing towards greater social change and movements. Without burning myself out to feel this pressure to be like, I need to be this perfect activist, like whatever that looks like on it.
Yeah. That's really helpful, and I will link to that in the chat and to the follow-up email for folks, because I think people are craving something like that right now. I think, yes, you absolutely named what's happening in Palestine. I also think just the reaction to the election in November and Trump's second term, people are feeling very much inspired and not, they need something to do with all of that energy.
Yes.
And I really like that structure you named, so thank you for sharing that. I will definitely spread that around to
Mhm.
anybody who is tuning in today. So my last question for you, this is the most fun question, it's the question I've been having the most fun with, I should say, is sort of like my dream question.
Yeah.
And I'm inviting people to just use their imaginations for this one. And that is, what do you hope to change about the world with your work? It can be big, small, whatever. I just would love to know sort of your hopes and dreams for all of the amazing work you're doing.
Thank you. I love a hopeful question because hope is just so radical to me. Um, I would just love for people to feel empowered and safe and secure in their bodies, to just embrace love and joy and pleasure. I hope like pleasure is something that they embody in all aspects of their lives, right? And like I always want to make a point, like, yes, I work in sex ed. Pleasure doesn't only exist in a sexual way. It could be eating a good ass meal, like listening to some your favorite band. It could be like
Mhm.
cleaning, like whatever you derive pleasure from, like hold on to that and live your life through that lens. Like that's essentially the point of like pleasure activism. And I love that I was introduced to it when I was in college, because it's like such a game changer, Like I think especially in capitalism, we're taught work hard now, experience pleasure later, Like you're able sacrifice that in the moment and then move on. The world needs you to show up as yourself, like as yourself, for yourself, by yourself. Because that's just the most radical thing you can do, because like there's so many institutions trying to feed us like you have to be this way or live your life in a certain way, when like at the end of the day, you only have this one life.
Thanks, Ashley, for that really wonderful, illuminating conversation. Next, we're going to chat with Ada Ada Ada. Ada is an algorithmic artist who works with gender, queerness, and bodies as perceived by computers through algorithms, software, artificial intelligence, and more. Ada moves between art forms, and so far her practice has included performative photography, video, generative art, net art, writing, interactive installations, as well as live artificial intelligence performance. The question at the heart of Ada's art practice is how can algorithms be used to understand and challenge experiences of gender and bodies in novel ways? She combines data, theory, and computation to view human experience through new lenses and perspectives. Her work often deals directly with societal struggles, concerns, and politics, for example, through data visualization or performative engagements. And her identity as a trans woman often informs the work she does. Ada's also the second person, a part of this panel, who is not based in the United States. So let's go meet her. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm really excited to talk with you about your work. I'm just also excited that your work exists in the world. So my first question for you is just, tell us a little bit about your work and how you use your chosen mediums, because you're working in a couple different mediums, to advocate for human rights, sexual freedom, and visibility.
Yeah. So I'm an algorithmic artist, or that's sort of the title I've given myself, because I like to work with computer algorithms and sort of investigate them critically. I have a background as a developer myself, so I sometimes also write my own algorithms and use them to sort of investigate how computers understand gender and sexuality and bodies and queerness in various ways. The sort of central work in my art practice is I call it like a performative photo project that exists on Instagram, where I've been documenting my gender transition as a trans woman for the last more than 3 years, by posting photos of myself where you can see my nipples, and then trying to figure out like when is my body, when are my nipples female enough to be banned from the platform. And so far, it hasn't happened. I'm still allowed on there, but a lot of strange stuff has happened over the years. So I have experienced censorship, but not sort of a complete ban. And I'm also sort of documenting that on my Patreon and sort of going over like what is the stuff that I'm sort of experiencing. And I also sort of use the Instagram profile itself to talk about transitioning and talking about trans identities and about censorship. And generally, the idea is to expose how large scale social media moderation is quite nonsensical and really inefficient in various ways. It doesn't sort of even live up to its own goals. So even if you agree with the goals, which I don't, then it still doesn't work. So there's a lot of power being given to social media platforms, but they don't even know how to sort of handle that power.
Yeah. Nonsensical is, I think, putting it kindly.
Yes.
We on this program a couple months ago, we did a panel about social media censorship, and Dr. Carolina R. was one of my panelists who's done a lot of research around these issues. And we talked a lot about not only the moderation, but what happens when you're over/incorrectly moderated. What an interesting experiment, though. And I will be curious to see how that changes over the sort of next several years, right? Because we're in, I think, a period, at least in the US, of really aggressive and awful anti-trans legislation and sentiment. And I wonder how that will filter onto the platforms.
Yeah, me too. We're also experiencing it in Denmark. It's sort of making its way across the globe. So yeah, and there's also talk about social media legislation in the EU and in Denmark nationally. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not either, but really interesting to track it, right? And
Yeah.
you'll have a lot of data. And so, you kind of got into this, but I wonder if you could share, or if you have a specific example to share of when your work sort of sparked conversation or change within your community or sort of the broader online community.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of keeps me going is that my work goes out to a lot of other trans people. Like, other trans people see my work and they sort of enjoy what I'm doing, and sort of just seeing a trans person visibly being herself and sort of just confidently going up against the big tech oligarchs with her own body. But I think just on a very small scale, I've had very newly transitioning trans people reach out to me and just ask me for advice about hormone replacement or voice training, or just letting me know that, like, thanks for being visible, really. So that's sort of something that keeps me going, is sort of these conversations with other trans people. I think, like, one of my maybe proudest achievements with the project was that I, along with a media publication called 404 Media, managed to actually get Microsoft to withdraw its gender classification services. It's on the project itself. I put the pictures on Instagram and await their response, but I also send my photos to so-called gender classification services that try to guess my gender based on just a photo, and the results sort of change from week to week. Sometimes all of them think I'm male, sometimes they think I'm female, sometimes they think I'm a little bit of both, which is quite funny to sort of witness. And for a while, Microsoft had this gender classification service available, but they actually said they were going to retract it, but they never actually did. So I reached out to 404 Media, and they reached out to Microsoft, and I think Microsoft felt the panic, and they were like, "Oh, damn, we have to like shut this down now." And so now there are no Microsoft results on my project anymore, because they don't have it anymore. So that's quite nice, because gender classification as a type of software is, quite transphobic and trans exclusionary. So it's really something that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, that's I didn't know that. That's so interesting. We're big fans of 404 Media here at Woodhall. And also, I love that example because one, I love the idea of standing up to this like big mega corporation, right? Who has all of this power. And yeah, that's wonderful. Like, thank you so much for sharing that. And I will definitely link to that piece about that so folks can read it and share it. So, that's a win, and we love our wins. And we talked a little bit about some of the challenges you face with some of the social media censorship, but I wonder if there are other challenges that you faced in just being able to express yourself, create art, and how you have dealt with them.
Yeah, so I think one of my primary challenges, just as a trans woman, is that whenever I have any sort of public media attention, people will get mad in the comments, just from my existing. And I've experienced it multiple times that, I've been in a Danish media site and they post it on Facebook. And if you go and look at the comments, it's just a cesspool of transphobia and just people saying nasty things. My general advice to any public trans person is don't read the comments, especially Facebook comments. But sometimes they would sort of also DM you or like try to reach you in other ways. And that is something that's quite difficult in being a trans person online, public trans person. But the way I sort of deal with that is, first of all, just don't really engage with it as much as possible. And also make sure that I have like a network that I can reach out to and sort of help me. Just, sometimes it helps just to show it to other people and laugh at it, because it's usually quite ridiculous and sad, I think, that people spend their time just being hateful. So it really helps to sort of share that with other people. And sometimes I've also tried to sort of rally an army of commenters from my supporters. So if I do something and a lot of people show up in my comments and try to like stir shit up, then I would post on my story, my Instagram story, and say like, hey, I'm gonna shut off my phone for 24 hours. There's some weird people in my comments. If you want, go to war with them. And often like my supporters outnumber the weird trolls by a lot. So it's really such a delight to sort of come back after the 24 hours and just see like people being like real allies and sort of supporters of my cause or my work. So yeah, just generally like use my network and try to sort of take care of my mental health as much as possible, and yeah, go touch grass, I think is also good advice.
I think that's excellent advice. I think we could all be reminded of that more frequently, particularly in this moment where it seems like bad news outweighs the good by quite a bit. And I love that example.
Yeah,
And
there
you're
was
right.
there was a recent study in Denmark that looked at like hateful comments on media publications, Facebook pages, and they found that 90% of all the comments were being made by the same, I think like 10% people. So it's really just a very small minority that get to sort of dominate the conversation on Facebook, and everyone else really don't want to engage because it's such an unpleasant atmosphere. So Facebook is lost, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably a safe assumption. And with that being said, your work is obviously quite personal, right? I mean, you're documenting your own transition, things that are happening to you, and I wonder how you balance this sort of very vulnerable personal sharing with sort of like broader calls for social change and activism that is also a part of your work.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think people have this idea that like I'm being very brave and I'm like sort of putting myself out there by like putting these pictures on Instagram, but like I have a lot of stuff going on in my life, and sort of it is obviously me on the photos, and it's me who writes the texts and everything, and I sort of put myself into the work, but then again, like it's just one small part of my story, and I try to sort of also, aside from just showing my personal transition, how it sort of changes and how I like to sort of play with my gender expression and everything, I also try to sort of share knowledge about how things work. And I think that's also why I think it's interesting to have these gender classification results next to the photos of my nipples, because we can't really know what's going on inside Instagram or inside Meta, but we can see these gender classification results and try to understand like how do computers work in terms of understanding people. So it's a tough balance, but I think like I show a little bit of myself, but there's a lot of it's always sort of in the service of enacting social change or enacting understandings of gender and technology and how they sort of intersect in different ways.
Yeah. Cool. So I have one last question for you. And this is my question where I've said to everybody, this is like we're dreaming a little bit with this one. And that is like, what do you hope to change about the world with your work? Right? Just like wave the magic wand, dream big. What do you hope to see happen?
I think what I want people to take home with them is a nuanced understanding that computers are fallible and that they are informed by the people making them, the cultures that they're made within, but also that we have some control in how they use us in a way. So, for instance, with the gender classification results, I identify as a trans woman, but I honestly actually don't want them to say, female across the board every time. I want it to be sort of confused in a way. I want it to be, I want to show the big tech corporations that like they don't actually have any control over my life or my identity. And that's really what I want people to sort of be empowered by, that they might feel like technological systems control their lives in different ways, but we have a lot of agency in how we use them. And I think like looking at the ways that pro-Palestine people are using the TikTok algorithm to get the message across despite shadow banning, I think is really interesting. People will. My favorite example is there's a guy who starts his videos by acting like he's playing GeoGuessr, and then he says like, oh, there's an Israeli guy in this picture. The picture must have been taken in Israel, and then he clicks, and then it's, oh wait, it's taken in Thailand. Why is it in Thailand? And then he sort of transitions into an explanation of how Israel is connected to oppressive regime in Thailand. And there's also just people saying, hey, you should write this in the comments so it boosts the TikTok algorithm in various ways. So people are being really, really creative with getting around censorship in various ways. And I think that's what I want people to know, that like we have some control. We have ways of rebelling against the algorithms.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a time for creativity. Jiz, Ashley, Ada, thank you so much for joining me this month. I really enjoyed our conversations. And folks, I'm really looking forward to the conclusion of this program next month, where we'll meet 3 more amazing folks who are defying the censors. So thanks so much for being with us today. Don't forget, I will be emailing you a list of all of the links these panelists mentioned, as well as ways to follow their work. And I hope to see you here in August for the conclusion of our Defying the Censors program. See you then, everybody.